to Homer Bound, a podcast where a couple of big old nerds read through and discuss Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. I'm Llama.
Oh, am I allowed to speak? Hey, I'm Wriste.
I told him to shut it before we started, and he apparently took that to heart. So that when I introduced him,
For this joke specifically,
he was able to have a cheeky introduction. Thank you very much for that.
Gotta take all the opportunities I can.
Did you enjoy yourself?
I thought it was funny.
Okay. Honestly, I think I'll say I did think it was a little bit funny as well. It took me a second to realize what you were doing, and then it was like, oh, I see how it is. Okay.
You weren't wondering to yourself why I wasn't making cheeky comments for the last 3 or 4 minutes.
Unbelievable. Anyways, yeah, here we are again. Another day, another episode. We got some fun books to go through today. But before we get into things, are you still laughing at your cheeky little joke?
So when you said we have some fun books to go through today, it makes me think of like a school teacher trying to get all the little children's excited for the thing they're gonna do. We have some fun activities today. Everyone, get in a circle. Sorry, that's why I was laughing.
No, it's okay. This is not the first time that I've been told that I have like teacher or mom voice.
Oh yeah.
Neither of the things that I've ever wanted to be, but that's okay.
We so often become the things we never wish we would be, and yet here we are. You know. Probably,
yeah.
My dad said he would never be a teacher, and he grew up to be a teacher, and here we are.
Yeah. The difference between me and him is that I won't I won't do that. Actually, I feel like it's possible, but it won't be for children. I won't teach children. That is a line that I will never cross. I don't want to. But I could see myself teaching adults. So that is, I'll put that out there into the universe. But yeah, children definitely know. And I feel like that's the kind of teacher that you were talking about. That like, all right, kids.
That's when you said we have some fun books ready. That's what my mind immediately went to.
Yeah, but anyway, we do have some fun books.
We do.
These are fun books. But before we get truly into them, I will issue our little content warning. We are immature adult human beings who have the minds of like teenagers or whatever. In terms of laughing at and using naughty words. There is some violent and also mature adult in the realm of hugging and kissing content in the Odyssey. So that is something to know as well. So listener, be advised. And now that we're done with that, we can get into the good shit.
Yeah.
So, last time we left off, we did books 13 and 14. So we did 2 tricksters, talking about Athena and Odysseus, our 2 peas in their pod. And we also did a loyal slave. And basically, what we went through with those 2.
A bunch of planning, visits, Odysseus sort of got to confer with Athena on how he approached his city, his country. Is it a country, or I guess it's a country? I don't know. How he approaches Ithaca.
His kingdom.
Kingdom, yeah.
His kingdom.
That's a good way of putting it. And this is the part where they like hide his stuff, right? And
that's right.
And Athena, it reveals, air quote, you can't see that, air quotes, reveals to him that suitors are set to take over his stuff and would be hostile to him. And he's like, oh, yeah, if thank God you told me, even though he probably already knew, because he was told by the prophet. And then he goes off and visits his swineherd, Euamus, who greets him and welcomes him as a stranger. He goes there in disguise as an old beggar and stuff. And Odysseus spins a whole bunch of tall tales, none of which Euamus seems to believe, which he expresses very specifically. Odysseus tries to suggest to him that Odysseus might come back. And Eurymus is like,
Yeah, he's like, no
probably
way,
not.
he's dead.
Yeah, he's definitely dead.
He's definitely dead.
You're just saying this so you can get like some nice clothes out of me or whatever. And yeah, that's where we leave off.
Yeah, and also when we left, Athena basically tells Odysseus, you get ready, and I'm going to go get your son. So this is where we are. Thank you for kind of filling in on the recap that I, like, absolutely blanked on.
No worries.
I looked at it, and I was just like, wait a minute, where did we leave off?
I know you've been having a rough few days, so...
Yeah, for all of you who are not aware of this, I tweaked my neck and shoulder the other day and am suffering. But that's okay.
She's been complaining about it all day.
Wow. 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 Rude.
I'm kidding.
Extremely rude. He is
true.
very much kidding. I'm laughing right now. Unbelievable. This is what I have to deal with, people.
This is what she has to deal with.
This is what I have to deal with. No, Wriste has been actually incredibly sympathetic. And I'm thankful for that. But like you really went there just now. You really fucking went there.
I make no apology. We're on episode 20. Like that. It's wild how fast time has gone. It's the 16th, the 16th of September today, and we're set to be done recording by the end of the month. So we are like on a beeline for that. We're wild.
Whipping through it. It kind of boggles my mind every time I like look at our schedule and realize like how far into this we are, and yet we still have a little chunk of it to go. Because I remember we were talking about this when we hit the halfway point a couple episodes ago about like how it felt like we had done so much, but we still had half of the Odyssey to go. But we're getting there.
I think we talked about it when we were halfway through the Iliad too. I was like, man, we're halfway through the Iliad.
Yeah, I will say that there have definitely been these like really surreal moments where you kind of realize like how far you are through it, but also how far there is to go. So yeah, it's definitely been a ride.
Yeah,
but
and
really
I'll bet Odysseus is having a similar feeling, right? He's gone through so much, and like it's right there. The finish line's there. He's at Ithaca. He knows he's getting a lay of the land, and he knows what has to be done, and now he just has to do it. Man, we're so much like Odysseus. It's crazy.
Yeah, speaking of being back in Ithaca, I realized a few minutes ago that I'm wearing my Ithaca Beer Company hoodie. I know, I'm pretty sure I've mentioned this before, but I went to Ithaca College. So we've been reading the Odyssey. Every time it says Ithaca, I'm like, hey, I used to live there. It's the wrong one. It's not the same Ithaca that I used to live in. The Ithaca that I used to live in is in fact named for this Ithaca. So that's been the fun little, moments of like surreal, wait a minute.
Getting PTSD flashbacks from Ithaca every time you read Ithaca.
I love Ithaca. I actually miss it all the time.
Yeah, I miss college.
Ithaca, New York is a great little town, and I love it. So every time it pops up, I almost have this kind of nostalgic feeling, which is interesting considering like how Odysseus must be feeling. He's finally made it back home.
Yeah. And he's settled in.
So yeah,
sort of.
like a kind of sense of like longing to go back to Ithaca for me. Like I'm like, hey, I kind of know how he feels. I would love to go back there.
Yeah, and I think we commented as well about how narratively weird it is that just halfway through the Odyssey he's back home. Like because normally you hear it's like when you hear about how the Iliad is about Achilles and Patroclus, and then you read it and you're like, oh, they're not in this that much. It's kind of the same thing with the Odyssey.
Absolutely.
Where it's like, oh, the Odyssey is about Odysseus trying to make it back home, and he's back home halfway through.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting, I think, to see how like who the main characters of these books really turn out to be, or like what the main themes are. Because like again, I think we've talked about like how a lot of people probably stop reading after all of the stuff with the Cyclops and all of that going on.
Yeah. Because
it almost kind of feels in some ways like a natural ending point, even though that the point of the Odyssey is Odysseus getting home and dealing with that situation.
Not so much getting home, but like reclaiming and restoring his home. Because like he's, as we mentioned before, like he's home, but it's different. And Athena disguises it so that he doesn't recognize it. But it's, as we said, it's been 20 years. Like the Ithaca that Odysseus knows probably doesn't really exist anymore. And he's been in all these other places that, you know, are like kind of like temporary homes, like Circe and Calypso and stuff like that. But none of it's like his place. And so Odysseus is going to go through some great lengths to restore what was once his as his.
Yeah, and so now Odysseus is home, and it still doesn't quite feel like home. And where we pick up with book 15, which is in Emily Wilson's translation called The Prince Returns, Athena has gone off to Sparta to fetch Telemachus, and Telemachus definitely doesn't feel at home right now. He's not physically at home, but also he's kind of been driven to see Nestor and Menelaus so that he can take his home back as well. You know, that he can figure out what to do about these suitors. And so Athena finds him at Menelaus's palace, kind of tossing, turning, not really being able to sleep.
They're on his
even
porch.
Yeah, I'm wondering, like, is this was a common thing to, like, set up, you know, a bunch of guests sleeping on the porch? I'm guessing the porch was really nice, you know?
I don't know if it's something like you'd play a banjo on or whatever.
I'm gonna go ahead and say my guess is a no there. But yeah, so Athena comes to Telemachus and says, you know, you need to get help from Menelaus to get home. It's time, you know. And furthermore, you need to be aware that there's a bunch of suitors in the kind of craggy rocks just outside of Ithaca who are waiting to kill you. Just FYI, you know?
I think also this book answers a question that I'm not sure that we asked earlier in the Odyssey. Why did Athena send Telemachus out? There are probably a couple of reasons that we can. You look like you have. I might have a couple of answers.
I was gonna say, like, I think this is a coming of age thing from him, for him, not from him.
Could be. So I'm not sure if Telemachus like really comes into himself in his 2 visits to Nestor and to Menelaus. It feels, what I would guess, there are probably a couple possible reasons. For one thing, Athena is sending him out for his own safety. It's possible that the suitors would have tried to kill him if he had stayed. Of course, him going out, I think, also prompts them to try to kill him, but I was
going to say, I would say that it's probable, and that no matter what, they were planning to kill him at some point.
Yeah, but the more logistically supported reason is that Athena has anticipated that Odysseus would come here to the swineherd. I think she sent him there. I can't remember.
She did send him there.
Yeah, and also she's having Telemachus return, but she's like, go through the back or whatever. Be careful. And I can't remember the exact detail. I guess we'll find out as we go. But I suspect that this leads Telemachus like directly to Euamus and by extension Odysseus. So she's setting up their meeting through this logistical.
She also tells Telemachus to go to Euamus.
Yeah. Okay.
So I agree completely, actually, with both of those reasons you just said. I think it's for his safety. I think it is a logistical kind of reuniting dad and son type of thing. But I also think it is a coming of age thing, because, like, otherwise why send him specifically to Menelaus and Nestor? Because I think the fact that he is to go see Menelaus and Nestor is to kind of help him gain some of that knowledge, so that when he is reunited with his father will see him as a grown man now, and not just, you know, the baby that he left. And also so that Telemachus, when he sees his father, will be able to see himself that way more so and have like a sense of pride. I don't think it's necessarily true that like when he gets back to his dad, he's immediately like grown man vibes.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think he comes into it with more of a sense of being able to actually help his father kill all the suitors. And I think it's really important that it is Menelaus and Nestor, these two like wizened, trustworthy men in both of their lives. You know, men that Odysseus trusts, certainly, but also men that Telemachus is able to trust and gain advice and like growth from. Because both of them have that kind of advice for him of like, you need to grow up, it's time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he takes that to heart.
Yeah, I guess I see it as more of a like what he gets from both of them are war stories. He gets the context for Odysseus that I think both of us kind of take for granted, right? Like we've read the Iliad, we haven't read about the entire Trojan War, but we have a sense of like what it was like. Telemachus has no sense of this at all. He doesn't know who his father is.
Yeah.
So when he visits Nestor and Menelaus, he knows better about who his father might have been in those years that the Trojan War had gone on. Like he obviously has access to who his father was like before then, but no one else could know aside from those two. So when he comes back, he has a good sense of like who his dad is, what he's like, and like can view him more completely, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely, like, I think that's a great read of it. I really like that read of it. But yeah, so you know, Telemachus is approached by Athena and told that these guys are lying in wait to kill him. And this like lights a fire under his ass, really. He wants to get back home, like, right now.
Mm-hmm. I can't remember if he specifically mentions it or calls it to mind, but I believe it was Nestor who told him how Agamemnon died. And it was Nestor who said that, right? It was Nestor who gave him
I think so,
that advice about, don't leave your home alone too long or else it'll be
I think both of them kind of give him that advice, but it's definitely Nestor who, like, really stresses, like, the longer that you're away from home, the more dangerous it gets.
Yeah. He's ready to go. He kicks Nestor's son away.
Poor Pisistratus.
Yeah, and he wants to go at nighttime, and
I love Pisistratus' response, which is like, whoa, we can't leave in the middle of the night. He's gonna give us a bunch of gifts.
Mm-hmm.
You gotta wait for the gifts. And as this happens, and correct me if I'm interpreting this wrong, but it's like dawn all of a sudden is just like, oh, you need it to not be night? It's light.
Yeah, I don't know what the
So I don't know like what time it is.
Well, from what I understand, time is a little flexible. The idea of like a 24-hour day, like I suspect 24-hour days are like normal, but the length of days is also pliable. Like in the Iliad, there's that one specific time where I think it was Hera who like dragged the sun down to cause night.
This kind of feels like another one of those instances because like in 5 or 6 sentences before this, Pisistratus is saying, this is impossible for us to drive when it's pitch black night. Dawn will come soon. And then all of a sudden, and it literally says, then all at once, dawn on her golden throne lit up the sky. So I'm just like, is this like a sudden, like, dawn heard you and was like, hi, I'm gonna pop up now?
We're getting into the weeds on this, but however, I don't want to. I want to say this because I don't want to spend forever on this. However, my guess. So it's not then at once. It's then all at once, which I think is different significantly enough to mean that this is just like saying that dawn, like all of it, lights up the sky. It doesn't. There's nothing to indicate that like this is the sudden work of a god or whatever, or even though the phrasing seems to suggest that that could be the case. I don't know. I guess I'm similarly unsure. I feel like it just means like, and then this happened, but the then isn't like this happened right after, it happened after.
Could be.
That'd be how I understand it.
We may never know. In any case, Menelaus gets up, Helen gets up, they both kind of walk over. Telemachus is ready to get home. Tells Menelaus he's ready to go right now. Menelaus is like, can't we feast? Can we not feast? And I agree, because who doesn't love a good feast? But Telemachus obviously has a mission and has been told by a god to get going now. And so Menelaus, shouts out for some slaves to prepare like a quick feast, I guess. A carry-out feast.
They give them like foam, like takeout boxes. Also,
yeah.
To dwell on that passage, I quickly looked up.
I love how you are the one who says that you don't want to dwell on this passage.
Well, I say that I don't, but what I'm really saying is we shouldn't. But I am.
Okay.
So I did quickly look up Robert Fagel's translation, and it says this is following Pisistratus's speech to Telemachus. At those words, dawn rose on her golden throne. So it is like.
Okay, that's what I
instant.
thought, because I was like, I swear to God, this, because even the then all at once still signifies to me, like, that's saying, like, instead of getting, like, a peaceful little sunrise all at once, like, the sun is up, wake up, motherfucker, like, we're ready to go. So, like, I took it very much as Pisistratus saying, oh, it's in the dead of night, and then, maybe Athena's over, in the corner, like, chilling out with Dawn, just like nudges her, and then Dawn's like, oh yeah, turn it on,
Yeah, and I was like, it's not something that I didn't think was possible, but I just wasn't sure, because like the phrasing was like a little bit off of what I would expect it to be.
If you look at it that way. Yeah,
like if it said then at once, I'd be like, oh, okay, but then like then all at once could mean like a couple different things. I don't know. Anyway, you're right. That does appear to be how it goes.
Okay, cool. Kind of makes me happy to know, because I had this like really cool image in my head of just like Pisistratus saying this, and then like the sun just like blasting.
We have to wait for sunrise.
Like, holy crap! It's sunrise. Okay. So yeah, I like that my mental image gets to stay.
Mystery solved.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, Menelaus provides carry-out boxes full of roasted meat. And Helen, and this, I don't understand the significance of it, I think, but like, I don't know, this to me also says kind of coming of agey things a little bit. Because Helen, as one of her gifts, one of her parting gifts, fetches this like really fancy, like the really nicest, one of the nicest robes that she has, and gives it to Telemachus as a gift for his wedding day, for his future bride to wear.
Mm-hmm.
And then, and I could have sworn.
Oh, what about it? Were you unsure about? I could have
sworn that. No, it's not that I'm unsure about it. Just she flushed it, like her cheeks flush. Okay. She didn't say what I thought she did.
What did you remember her saying?
I remember that she tells him to think of her on his wedding day. But I'm not seeing that here.
Well, it says, like, sweet boy, I also have a gift crafted by my own hands. Remember Helen.
Oh my
talking
God.
About herself.
It is. It's right there. I'm just like, I swear it's at the end. Yeah, it just says, remember Helen when your own wedding day at last arrives, and let your bride wear this. Until that time, your mother should take care of it. I wish you great joy. I hope you reach your well-built home in fatherland. I thought it was like a really sweet gift, but it's also one of those things where it was like, remember me on your wedding day. That's interesting.
Well, so I think we've talked about the politics of of significant people interacting, right? Like specifically
Yeah.
with Odysseus and with the Phaeacians. And I think it's important to remember that this isn't something we should take for granted, like anywhere, right? Or like that, like just casual buddy friendship should be taken for granted, like anywhere. Like Telemachus is going to Menelaus and Helen's, and his father and Menelaus were like war buddies, but they are still two different places, right? Like they like
Yeah.
Telemachus is still a prince, Menelaus is still a king, and maintaining that maintaining that connection is, I think, important. So when Helen
Yeah.
says, yeah,
However buddy they may be, there will always be those political considerations to take care of.
yeah,
Like,
and even and less cynically, like even just general friendship, right? Like you might give your friend like a bracelet or a nice bowl or whatever for them to remember you by later.
always mocking my love of fancy bowls.
I mean, I don't know. It's like it'd be a gift, right? Like you, like I mean,
It would
he
be a
even
gift.
gets a
It would be
bowl.
a great
He gets a
gift.
bowl right before Helen
He does
gives
get a
him
bowl
a robe, and like they would use that bowl.
because
And when you use that
because
bowl, it's like, oh,
Wriste,
where did this come from?
people appreciate a nice bowl.
Yeah, I know. And but like specifically when Telemachus uses that bowl, or like you've had gifts from other people, and you pick it up and you're like, oh,
Oh
this
yeah,
this came from my
totally.
family member, or this came from like a childhood friend.
Absolutely.
And so when Helen's doing this, that reads very similarly, right? It's like,
It
oh, you
does.
remember me, like I was at your house and you gave me this, and like stuff is how it helps us remember people. So
That's very true.
even though like we have all these like gifts, and just like our minds might think, okay, this is probably like dollar signs, like this is how much this is. Like there's also like just items like cauldrons and and stuff
Yeah,
that people have.
tripods.
Yeah, and that would, like, every time you use them or see them, you're like, oh, this came from there. I was there. We had a good time. They were nice to us. And that there's something binding about that.
Yeah, I think that's a great read on it. And I like did kind of think of that, but it was also just like why the wedding, like why the wedding robe?
It's a significant event.
But it is.
I mean, Telemachus isn't
and
going to wear it.
I think I do still kind of rated it as that like coming of age type of thing of like,
Yeah.
now you're a man, think of this as something that you will use as you come into your own, and you're going to marry someone, and you're going to go back home, and things are going to be different.
Yeah, it can also, I'm definitely down with the read of like it signifies and anticipates his coming into manhood, which I think like is starting to happen, but his escapade with his father will, like, I think, get him there more.
Yeah, I think that's what solidifies it.
Mm.
You know, I think these are all little like stepping stones that you get. And I think what happens next is kind of one of those. Because, like, so Menelaus is like, I'm not letting you leave without feeding you again. So they eat some food, and then they leave, and on their way out, Menelaus is like, by the way, like, give Nestor my best. I've always liked that guy. And, which, who doesn't love Nestor? I've said it once, I'll say it a million more times. Who doesn't love Nestor?
Seems
Nestor
okay.
is the bomb. And Telemachus kind of carefully edges his way around that by saying, yes, you know, we will pass on what you've said. I hope that I can go back to Ithaca, you know, and meet my dad again, but doesn't really go and say like, yeah, I'll tell Nestor you say hi.
Yeah, well, he says we'll give Nestor your best wishes, but he doesn't specify when. He just says, when we go there, we will pass this on.
Exactly.
Which is cashed in on,
And
like, pretty much right after this.
very, very shortly after that, but not before more bird signs.
Yeah.
We have bird signs. And this bird, let's see. An eagle flew. It holds a big white goose clutched in his claws, a tame one caught from the yard. And people are running around and yelling after it. And Nestor's kid is like, Menelaus, what do you make of this? What could this possibly mean? Is this for us or for you? And Menelaus correctly interprets this as a sign that
Well,
Odysseus.
Helen does.
Oh, that's right. You're correct.
Menelaus
Helen
does like a
cuts in
thinky
before
face,
Odysseus.
and Helen is the one who interprets it.
Yeah, and she basically prophesies that Odysseus, and this is completely correct, Odysseus is home already and planting ruin for the suitors, but also planning ruin for them. Planting ruin is a weird phrase. And Telemachus is like, oh my god, I hope that's true. If it is, I will bow to you as a goddess. And away they go. And they go back to Pylos, basically to drop off Pisistratus. And so that, Telemachus can get all of his people together and they can sail back because they've gone from Pylos to Menelaus's in a carriage, which is now, all filled with gifts and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And as they get there, Telemachus turns to Pisistratus and is like, so our dads have been friends for a really long time. We've become friends now. This has been wonderful. But, if I go back to your house, your dad will make me stay there longer. And I cannot do that right now. So,
Yeah.
are you going to take the bullet for me here?
There's a couple things this is doing. For one thing, this gives us a sense that Telemachus is mindful the fact that he would have certain responsibilities as a guest to not refuse Nestor if he asks him to stay, which he would. But also there's sort of a meta thing going on here where the listeners, given everything that's happened before, would expect some sort of host guest encounter as is usually the case. And this is just like, I feel like there is a read on this where the poem is just like, hey, we're just going to skip that. Like, he's just going to go because the good stuff is about to happen, right?
Right, you all know what's supposed to happen here, but, we don't want to do this again, do we? Can we just get to the good part?
Yeah, and Telemachus kind of anticipates this, I think, along with the audience. And so he's like, yeah, I'm just going to skip this. I want to get home. Yeah, and and I think it's the last time that a guest host opportunity really comes up, because the one before this one was Euaemus with Odysseus, and yeah, this would be if Telemachus did encounter Nestor, this would be the last time someone is guesting at someone's house. But
at someone's house, yeah, but I will say, this kind of isn't, because what we get right after this is, what is this guy's name again? It's Theoclymenus.
Yeah.
So, kind of a little bit, and it's interesting how this plays out, too. So, they are prepping the boat and getting ready to depart from Pylos to go back to Ithaca. And this guy, and we get this really kind of intense and long story about this guy's background.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Do you want to go into it?
I don't know. This is mostly about his family, right? This is less about him and mostly about his family.
Background and his progenitors, his ancestors, and I don't understand why it gets so much into it. I honestly don't.
I would suspect there are allusions to other
I would
known
suspect
myths.
that as well. That's probably a good, call on that. But nevertheless, this person approaches Telemachus as a stranger, he sees him making sacrifices. He sees him drinking wine. He sees him making prayers to the gods. So, a reasonable belief that this person adheres to the gods and to, Xenia. And approaches him and says, who are you? Who are your parents? Where is your hometown? And Telemachus tells him. And he says, I'm also far away from my home. I killed a guy, which is one hell of a way to start off a conversation. He says, I killed a man of my own tribe, so he's basically like a pariah now, and they want to kill him, and he's been doomed to homelessness. Please, oh please, oh please, will you take me on your ship? And
Yeah.
as he has been trained, to do, Telemachus says, yes, what we have is yours. You are our guest.
I actually have guest underlined. So yeah, you're right. This is
Yeah.
It's a
Yes.
weirder form of welcoming of strangers, because it's not like the ship isn't his house or whatever. He's not really at home. I don't know if being home is like necessary for Zinnia or other such similar attitudes to be observed. But one thing I also noted down, Telemachus has gotten some praise at at him having grown up, and he sounds like his father. And the move that he makes, answering Menelaus vaguely,
is very Odysseus-like.
is very Odysseus. However, this part is less Odysseus-like, because this random-ass stranger asks him a question, and he just tells him, like, truthfully. Odysseus would have totally lied to him. He's like, oh, I'm from Crete. I came from there. My family was this, and I did this, and I was sold as a slave here.
Into a 6-page story about like all of the fucking lies that I'm about to tell you, none of which are true, but which you will now believe is my genuine story. Yeah, exactly. I mean, it is the kind of contrast of those two situations is really interesting, and the willing. I mean, I get that this is a different world, or a different, we are approaching this from a modern viewpoint, but just like the idea of welcoming someone on a ship who was just like, yeah, I killed a guy and now I'm a pariah. Can I come on your boat? Is kind of hilarious to me.
He also, and I guess this is the part where I can't tell if Telemachus is like obfuscating what might be true, or if this is still what he believes. But he says, like, my father's Odysseus, he was. I don't know if this is like him correcting himself in terms of tense, like, my father is Odysseus, or was, he says he must have died
to me.
He must have died some dreadful death by now. I don't know if I'm supposed to read that as him, like, concealing this from this stranger for some reason, or if this is him, like, sort of wrestling with what he thinks has become his father still. It doesn't seem to indicate one way or the other. So I'm not too sure.
No, I don't think it does. I think there's like a really decent amount of ambiguity there. Like that there is no real way to tell, like, is he wrestling with, like, well, he was, I don't know. Or is he layering things onto that might kind of throw someone off intentionally? Who knows?
Yeah, although I don't know why he'd lie to someone about whether his father, because he doesn't know if his father is necessarily alive either.
Yeah, that's true. And he does say, I'm out here seeking news of my absent father.
Yeah, he basically tells him everything.
Yeah,
he
tells, yeah. It's it is very not Odysseus-like after some incredibly Odysseus-like behavior. So it's interesting to see how he's kind of picked up his dad's peculiarities in some places, but not others.
It does say that Telemachus took the stranger's spear and laid it on the deck, then climbed up, which suggests to me that he's not terribly interested in having this armed stranger behind him as he climbs up his ship.
Yeah, I don't think many people would be.
Yeah, so, like, he does have the presence of mind to at least cover the worst of bases. Like, this guy says,
yeah, I think, look, I think Telemachus may be a little naive and trusting, in some ways that his father maybe isn't so much, but he's not a schmuck. And
well, this reads as similar to, like, to Euamus helping beggar Odysseus. Didn't you have a name for him? Old man Odysseus?
Old man Odysseus.
Helping old man Odysseus. Whereas he's like, yeah, this guy's clearly lying, and he's doing it just for personal gain, but I'm still going to help him out because that's what you're supposed to do. Maybe Telemachus is doing something very similar, where he's like, okay, this guy is, like, maybe a little shady, so at the very least, I'm gonna like throw a spear up onto the deck before I climb up.
And then I'll keep an eye on him.
Yeah, yeah.
So they set off, and they're on their way back, and then we get this like kind of really abrupt cut back to Odysseus. Just like, meanwhile, Odysseus is sitting there having dinner with the swineherd.
With the noble swineherd.
With the noble swineherd, who is, pretty noble. Euamus is good people. And as, I like how we were just talking about, like, ow, I just bonked my knee on my desk.
Oh no.
I love how we were just talking about how Telemachus has or has not absorbed some of Odysseus's behaviors, because we jump right into Odysseus like testing the swineherd as to his hospitality. So basically Odysseus like says to him, oh, well, I might go over to the palace and, tell Penelope about what's been going on with me, and I'm going to go beg. I'm going to see if they'll give me some food. I can do what they want. I can do chores. I can do this, that, and the other. And Euamus is just like, what are you talking about? First of all, the suitors will kill you. Second of all, like, Penelope isn't seeing people. Or is this? No, he's basically says you'll be killed by the suitors.
Yeah, the suitors will bully you super hard.
They don't like people. So you should just stay here at least until Odysseus' son comes back. And then he'll, outfit you with a cloak and tunic, and you can go wherever the fuck you want. And then this is one of those portions of the book that I like underlined and starred. Because it's important. Very obviously, and I'm gonna read it out. This is around line 340. I hope Zeus loves you as I do, since you have saved me from the agonies of wandering. The worst thing humans suffer is homelessness. We must endure this life because of desperate hunger. We endure as migrants with no home. But since you now want me to stay and wait for your young master, tell me about Odysseus' parents. So, like, that for me was huge.
And this is Odysseus speaking.
This is Odysseus speaking about how the worst thing is homelessness. As a man who has just come back to his home, which is not currently, quote, his home. This was one of those where I was like, Eureka, this is the book.
This is it.
This is it. Like, this is it.
Yeah, and I guess when we say that, Odysseus includes like truth in his lies, I mean, because in a way, like, he's actively lying now. Like, he's concealed his identity. He's there under like false pretenses, even if that false pretense is like as a beggar. Like, the truth doesn't necessarily have to be like facts, right? It doesn't have to be like, oh, I ended up in the ocean for 7 days or whatever, which is like, but also like Odysseus is being, or at least I think he is being like emotionally honest.
The truth is in the heart of his statement.
He's revealing something about himself. Even though
Absolutely.
like Euamus he lacks the context that we would have to properly understand that.
If Euamus knew who was talking to him at this time, he would be like, "Holy crap,"
Yeah,
But he doesn't. But like Odysseus is just speaking utter truth under such a guise, and it just that one little passage struck me really, really as something that is like the heart of this book. Home. And Odysseus trying to find that home, and even still being here at that home without it truly being his home, he is still in that like singular focus mode and feeling that the worst thing that someone could face is to be without a home. That, as you said, like, it really does strike me as him being very emotionally honest in that moment, even if things are still under a veil of, concealment.
Less true. Yeah.
Alternative facts. Oh, I feel dirty just using that phrase. So he asks about his own parents, which also strikes me as like in this moment where he's saying this really kind of heartbreakingly true thing to himself. He's then asking about something which I feel like he would probably have some fear, like potentially finding the answers about, even though he kind of knows what the answer is. Because he has seen his mother in the House of Hades. So he knows that she's dead.
That.
He knows that she's dead. And I mean, he hasn't seen his father because his father is not dead. So not sure that he would have known for certain that he was alive, because it's possible that he could have just not seen him, or that he could have died in the time between when
he also went
there,
to the underworld like 8 years ago or something like that. So
that's true. Okay. So a good interval of time has passed. So like he is not sure about his father. But he does see his mother, yeah. That's one of the things that he sees his mother and is not able to talk to her at first, and then is later able to talk to her after he has heard from the prophet.
And Odysseus, with this is like a murderer asks about like, where's the briefcase? And then the detective says, I didn't tell you about a briefcase. And he's like this is what Odysseus is kind of dodging here a little bit, because he would have no way of knowing that that one of his parents is dead and one of them might still be alive. So he kind of hedges it by asking, tell me about Odysseus' parents. And then he mentions his father. And then he goes back to referring to both of them. Like his father, when he left, was on the threshold of age.
I didn't
Are they still alive?
That.
Have they died?
I didn't even think of that. That's very true.
Watching
so
Euemus
kind of, I love crime shows. I love Forensic Files. Like specifically watching Forensic Files in hotel rooms, because it's like the only good crime show that's ever on in hotel rooms. Anyways, back to the Odyssey.
Yeah.
So Euemus fills him in and basically says, your mom died an awful death, which, ouch. And kind of talks about how much everyone loved her. Laertes, tells him that Laertes is still alive and still praying to Zeus to let him die in his own home, which is really sad and also kind of relatable. I don't know. Dying at home in the comfort of your own home would probably be nice, but who knows?
Well, he's definitely not happy in his home.
No, he's not.
He's
deeply unhappy.
I can't remember when we got this description or to whom it was given, but he was described as like he sleeps outside like with the slaves, and he's like pouring dirt over his head and stuff like that. Very strong grieving vibes or like strong sad
and even
vibes.
Even right here it says, he feels such desperate grief about his son and his beloved wife, whose death made him so heartbroken he aged before his time. So like he is going through it, but he's still alive. Whereas, Odysseus' mother is not, and everyone grieves her, everyone misses her, everyone, drinks and eats and thinks of her. And this is where, like, it takes another turn that maybe you'll be able to shed some light on for me, because this prompts Odysseus to ask Euemus about, like, how he came to be here. And I think it's, like, he says, all her slaves missed talking to their owner, getting gossip, sharing some food and drink with her, and taking scraps to the fields with them, the kind of thing that makes slaves happy. And Odysseus is just like, Euemus, what a little child you were when you were taken far from home and from your parents. Tell me more about how you became a slave.
Well, what I can guess, and we've seen like we know that storytelling is a strong emotional catalyst. We've seen a lot of people cry at the dinner table. Telemachus has cried tales of his father or the war or whatever, and Odysseus has done similar things. We are not told that Odysseus is getting those same sorts of feelings. However, this strikes me as big subject changing thing. And Odysseus knows
I thought the same thing.
Odysseus knows Euaemus, so he is asking him a question which Euaemus could speak at length on. This is backed up first by how long this story is. It is elaborate.
It is long.
Yeah, it is elaborate how he came to be Odysseus' slave, which is the question Odysseus asks him. How did you get here?
It's like a 3-page long story.
Yeah, and Odysseus doesn't interrupt him here. And again, I don't know if this is framed as like an interruption, but it's definitely a very sudden change in topic.
Yeah, well, he exclaims it. It says he exclaims it, and I was just like, interesting, because like all of the other times that things have kind of been brought up as a distraction, it has kind of alluded to the fact that someone is becoming teary-eyed or someone is getting emotional, and it doesn't happen here. But what struck me was that like it's such an off-topic question that I was like, this has to be like a distraction.
Yeah, well, not so much a distraction. Well, maybe a distraction, I guess, but also just a way to change the subject. And as you said, yeah, we're not given any like, oh, he feels like he must cry, so he like lifts his cloak up to cover his eyes, like what usually happens. But it seems like that could be the case, especially since this is hard news. Even news that he already knows, right? Like when he hears stories about the Trojan War, like he already knows that, but he's reliving it.
Yeah, well, the other thing too is that like he has gotten to see his mother in the House of Hades, but I'm not sure that he's necessarily understood exactly like how heartbroken she was, and giving him that picture of that and how everyone has been missing her and him and all of these things that remind him of home, like that makes sense,
Yeah. Well, and what's important is that Odysseus asks a question, the answer to which he doesn't know, specifically for Laertes, and he follows that up with the question whose answer he does know, which is how Euaemus came here. Take that, do that what you will. But that's what he's doing. I think
so.
Right. And just trying to imagine, like, I'm not old enough to have been away from anywhere meaningfully for 20 years, but I moved states when I was like 15, and I left friends behind. And if like we were all to get back together again, like I would have so many questions, right? Like I would be interested in asking like all this stuff, like, hey, what have you been up to? Like, are you married? How's your work? Stuff like that. Or, and if I had like a much closer friend, the questions would be more personal. And, if I'd had any like strong, meaningful relationship that I wanted to rekindle, like going into those deep emotional places would be hard for me.
Yeah, definitely. But the real question is, would you disguise yourself as an old, decrepit man to be able to test your friends?
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Oh, you would? Okay, cool. That could be a lot of fun. Why the hell is this old man here? Where's Wriste?
What is he asking about?
He said he was coming. It is I. I've tested you this whole time. I love Euaemus's response. I like get the feeling that Euaemus is this really kind of like rugged, he's a swineherd, so his day-to-day is like herding pigs and stuff. I get the feeling of him as this like rugged kind of older, kind of hardened, leathery, type of dude who just doesn't give a shit anymore, because his response is like, since you've asked this question, shut the fuck up, drink your wine, and let me tell you a story. But so he goes into this really like long story of how how he became, or how he came to be where he is now. How he was basically kind of tricked into being sold into slavery.
Yeah, the long story short is basically this lady he trusted had him come along with her on a ship, right? This lady he trusted, who I think was like in with his family. She was like in with these traders, like traded goods with his family in where was he? Uh,
Phoenicia?
mm,
Oh, the people are Phoenicians.
Syria, yeah. That's where he came from. And the traders were Phoenicians. There was this lady who figured that he'd be worth a lot, and she tricked him into coming along, and he was sold to Laertes when he was young.
Yeah, and Odysseus, with absolutely zero self-interest here, says, in the end though, Zeus has blessed you, since after going through all of that, you came to live with someone kind, a man who gives you plenty to eat and drink. Your life is good. But as for me, I am still lost. I trekked through many towns before I wandered here. That took me aback a little bit.
It's an odd statement. So I think obviously we are immediately tempted to view this exchange in terms of class. Odysseus is a king, Euaemus is a slave. So it's a little rich coming from Odysseus saying that, you have it pretty good.
Yeah, although, this is coming from him in the guise of a homeless, old, decrepit man.
Yeah, well, yeah, obviously.
And only we as the reader know that this, get this perspective on, like, boy, that's rich.
Yeah, of course, Euaemus would not have this perspective. Euaemus would be like, yeah, or whatever, or maybe not. But I think if we're to read what Odysseus is trying to say, charitably, he's heard this one misadventure, and it's a bad misadventure, but it happened when he was young, and he's been here for all his life, and he's safe. And as he's expressed, Odysseus had been really good to him. The house had been really good to him, which is far from what Odysseus has experienced in his travels. He's like, he can't find a friendly place except for that one time. The Phaeacians.
The Phaeacians, yeah.
And
I also think it's important, though, that it's coming from the guise of the homeless man, who's, now talked to Euaemus several times about, like, wandering and I mean, I think this brings me back to that kind of, that little passage about, like, homelessness is the worst thing that someone can go through. And this is him saying, you found a home. Even though it's a life of slavery, like, you found a home, and you found a good life too, not just, some asshole who, like, starves you and beats you. You found someone who feeds you and who keeps you safe and who has given you what is ostensibly a good life for a slave.
Yeah, I mean, this is cashing in on when Odysseus said, as you said, homelessness is the worst thing. And I guess I'm curious as to what the connotations of homelessness are. Because, like, if you really think about it, no one is homeless. You can make anywhere your home, right? Like, technically speaking. But that's not what we really mean when we say home, right? Or homelessness. Like, the packed into the word home is, like, safety, security, permanence, all that sort of stuff. And I would imagine that similar concepts are packaged in when Odysseus says what Dr. Emily Wilson has rendered as homelessness. Homelessness is the worst thing. And when looked at through that lens for the last 10 years, homeless does kind of describe Odysseus. Even though...
Yeah, it absolutely does.
Yeah, even though he spent, like, like the sense of permanence, right? Even though he spent a year with Circe, he and with Calypso, he wanted to leave, but couldn't. It was, even though I'm sure that there are some things that he enjoyed there, or could have enjoyed there, there's
he enjoyed himself plenty.
but there's also a sort of hostile relationship between him and Calypso, because he is like, we do meet him like grieving on the beach, and this is after like a long time of him not being able to go home, right? And this is obviously something that he wants to do. It'd be like I don't know, if I were locked in an apartment and I wasn't allowed to leave, but I had like a bunch of video games, like I could enjoy the video games, but I would still want to go out and leave, right? Like that sort of thing. But I think it's important not to put too much weight on the fact that Odysseus could enjoy things like, say, Calypso's company or the great food or whatever. Like those are obviously things.
Sorry, I now just have this image of you in my mind, like 7 years later. Like, yeah, Fire Emblem Awakening was like okay, but like I really kind of want to leave this fucking apartment now.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that's what Odysseus means when he says homeless, and by extension, that's what he's getting at when he tells Euamus that he has it good through the lens of homelessness,
I think so.
which is at the forefront of Odysseus's mind. I think this can be understood a little bit more charitably than some king telling some slave that you got it good.
Yeah, I think I think there's definitely a lot more complexity to it than just that.
Yeah.
No matter how you read it,
Yeah.
It's not just one of those things where it's just like, oh, that's rich. But I will say that definitely like popped into my head. It was like, that's
it's an element. It's something worth considering.
To tell your own servant.
Yeah.
But there are like, I think like just about everything that we could probably pick through, of which there are infinite things, in both the Odyssey and the Iliad. Like you can pick through things till the end of time. But I do think that like that is because there are so many things that are like on the surface might seem a certain way, but when you read into the context and the kind of meaning of them, there's a lot more than is just what is on the surface. There's a lot of meaning hidden in this. But yeah, so they talk about this. Odysseus says what he says, and then they kind of drift off and get a few hours of sleep. And while they're doing that, Telemachus finds his way back to Ithaca without finding the suitors lying in wait for him. Fortunately, they eat a little bit, they drink a little bit, and he tells his people to like drag his ship in towards town while he goes off and visits the swineherd. And his new guest, Theoclymenus, asks him like, so where do I go though? Because, I've now supplicated to you. I don't know what to do. I don't know where I am, and you're not going back to your house. And I loved poor Telemachus can only really reply to him, well, I would invite you home normally because we're good hosts, but I can't because there's a bunch of guys who are like eating all my food and they would kill you. They would definitely kill you. And my mom won't see anyone, so you basically can't go there. And yeah, I don't really know where you should go. Maybe you should go see Eurymachus, one of the suitors, because he seems like he has a lot of stuff. Maybe he could give you some stuff. Which is a kind of hilarious suggestion, which doesn't come to fruition because as he says this, there's another bird sign. I love all these bird signs. And it is a hawk. It is Apollo's messenger, which is a hawk clutching a pigeon in its talons. Feathers scatter between the ship and young Telemachus. And his guest, who actually is like, is it his like progenitors, his ancestors? He's a prophet. And I think may have even come from like a line of prophets or like important people at the very least, but he is described as a prophet. So he reads this bird sign and he says basically like, this is a sign that your family is awesome. There will be no other kings in Ithaca. Like, you have the power in Ithaca. You will be kings of this place forever. And Telemachus is just like, that's great. I love that. And tells his his faithful man, Piraeus, to, like, let the stranger go to his house instead of sending him to one of the suitors. And then Telemachus hops off board and takes his spear and goes off towards the swineherds. I found this little episode to be, like, fascinating. How, like, you get home, you don't know where to send this guy who is your suppliant, and you're just like, I don't know, maybe go to, like, what seems to be a less shitty one of the suitors, I guess. And then he reads this bird sign, and all of a sudden it's like, you know what? On second thought, I like you, so why don't you go with my trusty guy over here?
Reminds me a little bit of that part where Odysseus tells the story of Odysseus in the I think it was in the Trojan Horse or something like that, and how one person needed
that's right.
cloak, and he sent someone off, and he got to use his cloak or something. And Euamus was like, "Oh, what a great story! You know what? I'll give you a cloak this evening." And yeah, that's what it reminded me of, I suppose.
It does.
I'm not sure what's been exchanged, but it certainly feels like an exchange of some kind.
It does, doesn't it? I mean, I think also we, like, or at least I, like, kind of not lose track, but, like, maybe slightly undervalue the degree to which people actually cared about prophecies like this. Because I think, to me, sometimes it almost sounds silly that, like, some bird goes by with a pigeon or a goose in its talons, and people are just like, oh my gosh, this surely means that you will be a king forever, or this surely means that, you know, Odysseus will come home and wreak havoc on all of the people who are messing with his home. And, like, it just because we live in a modern time where if someone says something like that, you have questions about their stability. It just sounds not real, but this would have been taken very seriously.
That's definitely been an element of how people interface with prophecies, right? Like I think we talked about a few times how, like, the gods are understood as, like, unambiguously there. What people will doubt are not the gods, but prophecies, because prophecies could be misinterpreted,
people can mistell
or they can lie and stuff like that. So.
Yeah, or they could say something that's, like, half true and half bullshit, you know? You don't know particularly. It always catches me a little off guard, I think, when someone is just like, a bird! Oh my god, this has to mean, you know, that such and such is going to happen, or so-and-so is coming back home, and it just sounds ridiculous on its face, to me, through a modern lens.
Yeah.
But it's very real here, and apparently convincing enough to, you know, not send a guy to maybe go get killed by a suitor who is feeding off of your father's land.
I don't think he'd kill him.
So knowing what we know in the future, I feel like he maybe would. But knowing what we know now, I can see how, like, you would think that. Because Eurymachus is the one in the next book who kind of chimes in, saying, like, oh, we totally didn't want to kill Telemachus, all the while, you know,
well, yeah,
scheming,
but, like, that's
to
Telemachus.
Do exactly that.
Telemachus
that's
is, like,
true.
very specific. I don't think he'd, like, is, like, murdering people willy-nilly or whatever.
I don't know. Who knows? However, that is basically where book 15 leaves us off, you know. Telemachus is back and off to see the swineherd. And so when we come back, we will get into book 16 and see what happens with that. But for now, we will take a little break, and we will see you guys very shortly. Hello, dear listener, and thanks for sticking with us through our little break. We'll be back in just a couple minutes, but I'd like to take a moment during the break to thank a few people and give a little information about the podcast. First, thank you for listening. This podcast has no sponsor. We've produced everything in-house and on our own time. And if you all are enjoying the fruits of our labor, that is the best thanks that we can imagine. You can follow us on Twitter at Homer_bound for new episodes, or just watch our podcast page wherever you're listening to us now. I'd like to thank Wriste for inviting me along on this adventure, which has been such great fun. I'd also like to thank the composer and performer of all the music you've heard throughout the episode, who happens to be my dad. Thanks, Dad. You're the absolute best. I'd also like to thank Bubbo for her contributions to the audio, Webs2D for original art of my llama character, Total Love for additional art and graphic design, and Ghosty for graphic design as well. I'd like to thank our many guests for their time and expertise, and finally, an especially big thank you to Dr. Daniel, who closes out each show with additional insights on our discussions. We hope you'll consider reading along with us. We're using the Emily Wilson translation of the Odyssey, and while we try to keep things intelligible for those who are new to the story, you might get more out of our discussions if you've read ahead, so feel free to pause and return later after you've read up. We would also like to remind you to stay tuned after Wriste and I have finished, since Dr. Daniel will have some awesome words of wisdom to add to our discussion. All right, thanks for hanging out through our break, and I will give it back to me and Wriste for the second half of this episode of Homer Bound. And we are back from our little intermission. I have refreshed my tea. I almost choked on my Chipotle burrito bowl, but we've recovered from that, which is beautiful. Wriste, I hope you had a good little break as well.
Yes, I had some mashed potatoes I made a while back, and I also I made like a creamy garlic pork chops a little while ago, and that resulted in some extra sauce, gravy, I don't know. But I put that on top of the potatoes.
Gotta love some extra garlic sauce on some taters.
Feeling good.
Awesome. So both of us have snacked, refreshed ourselves, and now we are ready to get back into book 16, which in Emily Wilson's translation is titled Father and Son. Because this, my friends, is the book where we get our beautiful reunion. Telemachus is finally, when you think about it, Telemachus is really meeting his dad for the first time. Because when his dad left, he was a baby.
I was gonna say, reunion is almost kind of implies that, they knew each other before and they were separated and now they're going to get back together. But, Telemachus was never old enough to know his dad, right? There's no way. There's no way, because he left him when he was, He
was a little baby.
He was either a baby or he was, super young. Either way, he wouldn't remember him.
I'm pretty sure it's mentioned more than once that he was a baby.
Yeah, I'm guessing that, but I don't fully trust my memory on those things. So, but yeah,
Fair.
Yeah. Either way, there's no way he knows what his father looks like. So this is... Yeah, as you said,
well, it's also
meeting.
It's more than just he doesn't know what his father looks like. He doesn't know his father. He's been told all of these things about his father by all these, by his mother, by the servants in their household who were around when Odysseus was actually there. And this is kind of something that we'll see, when, in a page or two, when he comes upon Euaemus, he is more like a father to Telemachus than his own father really is. Not in the sense of actually rearing him necessarily, but more in the sense of Euaemus actually has enough memory of this kid to get all emotional when he comes back. So so let's get into it. I mean, Telemachus is kind of, walking up to the swineherd's home. Odysseus and Euaemus are like having breakfast, lighting the fire, getting the work started for the day. And Telemachus walks up, and these dogs that would usually be barking at, strange people approaching don't. They pant, like, happily. So this is, a different version of the meeting that we got with Odysseus and Eumaeus. Odysseus walks up. These dogs don't know who the hell he is, and even if they did know who Odysseus was, like, this isn't Odysseus, it's old man Odysseus. And this is the kind of mirror image of that encounter, where he comes up, the dogs don't bark, and, we get this kind of a little bit from Odysseus's, not from his point of view, but we kind of get a peek into his thoughts as this happens. This is his dear son. He sees his own son. And then Euaemus just, like, jumps up, spills all the wine, and runs up to Telemachus and just, like, loses it. Is crying, and because probably when he left, they all thought he was going to die.
Yeah, because of the suitors' hostility, and word's gotten around, as we'll find a little bit later. Penelope got word that the suitors were planning on killing her son as well, which is bad form as a guest.
She is not happy. But yeah, so he is, like, super, super pumped to see Telemachus. And Telemachus, this is so sweet. Telemachus calls him Grandpa. I don't know how that exactly translates, but he calls him Grandpa. And that, like, gave me little, like, warm feels on the inside.
I'm thumbing through the I'm thumbing through the Fagles translation, which is also, by the way, titled Father and Son, and I'm trying to see
it's Grandpa there as well.
How it. I don't expect it'll be rendered as Grandpa, but
should be shortly after line 30 or thereabouts.
Yeah. It is written as dear old man for Fagles. So I guess I'd be curious as to, like, what the.
I'm very curious as to what the actual Greek word is there.
Yeah, and that seems to be something that Dr. Emily Wilson does a fair bit. She'll make the extra leap, like my favorite example is Athena's pigtails, right? It's clearly like I was saying, okay, she's
really
a child.
She'd
probably have pigtails. And just the same, Telemachus is, probably says something like old man or something that indicates, like, his age, but like the the closeness that seems to be shared between them in this moment, and combined with that seems to suggest, as Emily Wilson has rendered here, like a more something closer to familial as opposed to just, hey, you old guy,
Yeah.
So I would guess it's a reasonable jump to make, if it is a jump.
Because they clearly have, like, a deep love and respect for each other. And then, of course, Telemachus kind of comes in. Euaemus takes his sword and is kind of prepping him to, sit down and get comfortable. And Odysseus, old man Odysseus, offers his seat. And Telemachus's response, I think, is one of those things where you can kind of see that he's started taking on that role of, like, manhood and ownership over himself, because his response is to say, you sit there, stranger, I will find a chair in my own hut.
Yeah, I think that's a decent read, right? Like, he is, as you said, he's sort of coming of age. This is his place. It's actually sort of unclear as to whether this is, like, something new for Telemachus, and this isn't even his house necessarily, right? Yeah, I don't really know how to read this.
Well, I mean, technically it is his house, because this
in a
is
way,
his
yeah,
slave's household, and by virtue of it being the slave's household, it is their property.
Is their property, but it's not his home, right?
But it's not his home. But he does call it his home. Or I guess he calls it his hut.
I guess he does say that. I can find a chair around my hut. Yeah. Oh, that I guess I never really thought about that passage with that reading, because he does say, this is. He doesn't say like, oh, this is my hut. He's like, oh, I'll find a chair around my own hut. Like, this is.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I read it. It's like, yeah, no, don't worry about it. You're good. This is my hut. You're my guest, or at least he doesn't say this, but it's kind of supposed that like this random guy staying in his slave's hut is probably the guest.
Well, it's also possible that when he says this is my hut, it's like how if you're a family, like everyone will say, oh, this is my house, even though like I don't know who owns your house, but the deed owner isn't like their house.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that the fact that he says my slave can help right after that kind of does denote to me, at least, that he's making that distinction, that this is his stuff.
Yeah, could be.
That's just, I mean, this is also me reading this as like,
yeah,
I guess like kind of as as I would read stuff that I read for history related stuff, like that is a pretty clear kind of signal to me that like this is mine. This is my slave and this belongs to me.
Yeah.
But I think that's not like maybe the most important detail here,
It could be. I mean, this is I'm unsure, I guess, of how Telemachus feels exactly about like the relationship between master and slave is like unusual for me. I don't know how to view it. Like obviously slaves like Nanny and Euamus are like kind of part of the family, but like I don't know what that means for Telemachus. I don't exactly know what that means for Odysseus or Penelope. This is more of a cultural understanding thing than anything. I wouldn't expect this to explain it any more than I would expect like a modern day novel to explain what a bus is, but
sure.
It's just one of those things that I being situated in the year 2021 doesn't really know what exactly the dynamic is here. That's what I'm grappling with right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think my kind of knowledge of the, again, I'm not well versed in like ancient history or Greek history or anything like that, but just knowing kind of like my inclination would be to say that like while these slaves were old and established and trusted members of the household, it would never really be forgotten that they are slaves and that anything that they own is owned by, the person who owns them. Anything they kind of have purview over is still Telemachus and Odysseus's. I don't think they would ever really forget that.
Yeah.
But I think you get to a certain level of trust, and then that these people are aware of their standing within your household, and However, let us sally forth, because I want very much to get into the upcoming moments, which are really, really interesting to me. So Telemachus says, I'll get my own chair, and then asks Grandpa, where this strange guy came from, and like he surely did not walk to Ithaca. That cracked me up a lot. It's an island. It's an island.
I don't actually know.
Isn't it? Could have sworn it was. I could be wrong about this. Now I want to know.
Flexing your Googling muscles.
You've done it before. Of course it comes. This is so funny. It comes up. It is an island. It came up as my alma mater. So yeah, it actually did come up as Ithaca, New York, where I went to college.
Nice.
Which is kind of freaking hilarious, because I think I've mentioned this maybe once or twice before on this podcast that like I did go to Ithaca College, and every time I see the word Ithaca while reading,
we talked about
the
this
Odyssey,
in the last book.
Did we?
Yes.
Okay. Because it throws me off. It continues to throw me off.
Well, throws Google off
And
too.
I did mention at the beginning of this episode that I am wearing my Ithaca hoodie. But anyway, so Ithaca is an island. So
Okay.
like I think that the like he surely did not walk to Ithaca is kind of hilarious in that light. And Euamus kind of spits back a few of the lies that that Odysseus has told him about where he's from. He says he's from Crete. He says he's wandered. You know, some god has spun his fate. Now he has run away from the Thesprotians who brought him and arrived here on my farm. And he says he is all yours, your suppliant, to treat however you desire. Which is really interesting to me.
What, do you find that the phrasing is interesting?
Yeah, a little bit. Like, he just got back. And I get, you know, you're going through all the introductions and everything, and then you just tell him in front of the same guy, like, he is yours to do with what you desire. But it makes sense, you know. Odysseus has kind of gone through that, you know, his part of the Xenia, the supplication, the appeal to help. And Euamus, you know, insofar as he is able to do it, has welcomed him kind of in the name of Telemachus. I think that's what interests me most about it, is kind of Telemachus just coming home and being told, like, oh, by the way, I fished you a suppliant, you know? Not so much in those words, but like
I have something for you.
Just, yeah, it's like, I have a little thing for you. It's a person.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess I don't have too much to say about it. It's there. We just talked about how you know, Telemachus is like asserting his ownership of the place. So it only his hut. So it only makes sense that now that he's here, he gets to take over host duties.
Yeah, well, I think this is kind of one of those chances for him to exercise some of the good judgment that he's been taught, or that, you know, to a large degree he kind of already had, because his response to this is like, well, what do you know, what can I do here? You're welcome to kind of keep him and help him out, but if I send him to the suitors, it's not going to go well. And it more so than that, not only will it not go well, but it will be a humiliation to me, and probably in some way to my house, that if he was abused, which he will be. And then Odysseus does his kind of, did you you know, allow this to happen? How did you allow this to happen?
Oh, tell me more. Tell me I mean, what we're walking through is sort of this awkward moment of like Odysseus is like poised to get all this information, but like he's surrounded by people in the know, and he has to try to get this information without revealing who he is. And I know, like, this has gone on, and you know, obviously, as we foreshadowed, Odysseus is going to, like, you know, actually meet his son as himself, and they're gonna meet, but he also keeps up his disguise around Euamus afterward. Like, Euamus has to go off and do something, like send a message or find something out. I can't remember. Then he comes back later in the book, and Odysseus is back in his old man disguise after talking to Telemachus. But like, I wonder, like, why is he holding back for so long?
Yeah, and it also like describes him as being frustrated here, as he's like, kind of questioning Telemachus and saying, you know, oh, it breaks my heart. You know, you're a good man. How did you let them bully you?
I mean, I think that's a fairly pretty understandable frustration, or like the response is pretty, like, I would expect that of like anyone, right? Like if I told someone, hey, take care of my house, and then I'm gone, and then I come back and the garden's overgrown and like there's stuff piled everywhere and nothing's clean, and I would ask the guy I entrusted my house, hey, what's happened? Like, why is this like this?
Yeah, like, it definitely makes sense. It's just the way that Odysseus says all of this to him that I'm like, there's part of me that's like, I think you're giving the game away a little bit. Just maybe a teeny teensy bit, because he goes into like, it's interesting how in Disguise I think he uses like really strong language that kind of speaks to it being him. And it's not that what he says to these people is completely unreasonable. It's just kind of like, as the reader who knows who he is and that they don't know who he is, but we know who he is. It just, like, he then goes into saying, let someone chop my head off if I would not destroy them when I came inside the palace of Odysseus. And then I would rather die in my own house than watch such crimes committed.
Yeah. Actually, this part makes me wonder, like, how exactly is Odysseus trying to come off? Is he playing, like, a sort of kind of mannerless, kooky, like, old guy? Like the stereotypical, like, crazy homeless stereotype sort of guy? Because, like, this is... I mean, we know that... Or I feel like we can comfortably say that Euaemus is and has been impatient, or feels impatience with Odysseus. His answers tend to be pretty short, and the way he says, like, he's all yours to treat however you desire to Telemachus.
It's like, all right, now this is like, no longer my problem.
Okay, whew. And like, I feel like Odysseus would know this. I don't know, I'm not sure. This part where he says, like, my friend, it is my duty to speak out. This is just to Telemachus when he hears about, well, or when Telemachus says, this is how things are at the house. It is my duty to speak out when I hear the dreadful things those suitors are doing in your house against your will. It breaks my heart. You are a good man. Tell me, did you choose to let them bully you? Have the Ithacans been turned against you by some god, or do you blame your brothers? Who should be a man's supporters when conflict comes? And he makes all these like lofty statements that would be like completely out of place for someone who has no actual personal stake in
not
this
only
sort
that
of thing,
but
right?
like, Telemachus is not talking to you, bro. He's talking to Euaemus and saying like, yeah, I'm not gonna send this guy to these suitors. And then Odysseus is like, I just feel like it's one of those classic, like, you are not being talked to but you have to say something. And Odysseus is just like, I have to get this off my chest. And that's always when you know that someone is gonna say something like maybe a little bit out there.
Yeah, so there's a lot about this that feels like Odysseus is slipping a little bit, but then there are some things that suggest that he is still in control, because he asks one of those questions that would be not a question that's someone who is very familiar with the place would ask, right? Like he says, like, do you blame your brothers? And Telemachus says, I don't have any brothers, which Odysseus might know, I guess, or perhaps this, I guess, even more sinisterly, like maybe Odysseus is asking, like, has Penelope like had any kids while I was gone?
Has she been banging?
Yeah, she been banging. But like maybe that's the point of the question. Either way, it's clearly a very deliberate kind of question, because if he's...
Yeah, these are all very deliberate questions, I think. Like, I don't think there's any single one of these questions that I'm like, why are you asking that? But I am asking, like, why are you asking that now? Or, like, at this, like, why are you interjecting in this moment to have this, like, outburst? I get why, because it's prompted by what Telemachus is saying to Euaemus. But it's also just like, Odysseus, what are you trying to get out here?
The subject of the suitors has come up finally. Like, he can actually talk and ask about them. So, like, if he's been itching to jump to that subject, this could be that time. And part of me wonders, again, if he's, like, sort of presenting himself as this kind of out there guy. If this is something, oddly enough, that you would, like, expect, right? Or you'd, like maybe not expect, but when he says it, you'd, like, brush it off as, oh, I guess it's just kind of the way this guy is, or something like that. It could be he's hamming it up, is what I'm saying. It's possible he's hamming it up.
I think you could very much be right about that. And this gives Telemachus kind of an opportunity to, like, tell his little sad, woeful, I never knew my dad.
Mm-hmm.
I never, now all of these assholes are here, and my mom, like, won't say no to marrying one of them, but also, like, hasn't done it. So
Yeah, and then he sends Euamus to tell his mom that he's good.
Yes, but not his father. Because Euamus asks if Laertes should be told that he is back since he left. Laertes has done nothing. He won't eat, he won't drink, he won't check his fields, he won't do anything. He is seriously depressed. And Telemachus says, yeah, that's sad, but no, leave him alone. Which is very sad. But he's waiting on his dad to be home.
Mm-hmm.
And at this, Euamus goes off towards Penelope to tell her, the happy news. And Athena, seeing him leave the yard, has a little, wink wink moment with Odysseus, who sees her. Athena comes in the form of a tall, beautiful, skillful woman. And Odysseus can see her and Telemachus cannot, which I think is obviously, really, really intentional. It kind of says the gods are not equally visible to everyone. The dogs can see her, but they don't bark. And so Odysseus sees her do the old wink wink and walks over to see her, and she's like, all right, it's time to reveal yourself to Telemachus because I'm ready to fight.
That part, I actually have that line underlined, line 170, 172, or line 171. Indeed, I am itching to fight. I have itching to fight underlined. And this is something this is a statement that Dr. Emily Wilson made in her introduction, where she says, Athena loves violence, which is a pretty intense statement to make, but I think it tracks, right?
It does track.
And I wouldn't have necessarily conceptualized her as someone who loves violence without that statement. But yeah, it tracks from the Iliad.
Tracks from the Iliad, tracks from the Odyssey, tracks from all of it. It's not one of those things that I think we are usually led to think of her as, because we've kind of come back to this over and over, that I think the image that we're given of Athena in kids Greek mythology stuff and in some easier to parse Greek mythology stuff is that she is, the goddess of wisdom, the goddess of, smart people.
Smart people.
Smart people.
I think it's easy to imagine a kind of stiff, prudish lady who has very wise things to say or thoughtful things to say. We've talked about or how we've encountered Athena outside of the Greek myths that we've been reading.
And also I feel like there's always a bunch of owl imagery related
although
to
she
Athena,
likes owls, I guess.
She does like owls.
Owls are cute.
They're a real hoot. I had to. Owls are adorable. There are some really tiny owls that are super, super cute.
Oh yeah,
I get why Athena likes owls.
They're also don't they? I mean, I imagine they probably represent wisdom or something, because all the gods have their own birds, right? Like we saw Apollo's hawk a while ago. Zeus's are eagles.
Yeah, there's a lot of crossover between representations of the gods and animal pairings.
Yeah, and I don't know, I guess, exactly how violent owls are, but in case...
I feel like owls can be pretty violent.
Yeah, it could be.
They have really sharp talons.
Well, and in case we haven't driven it home hard enough, a conception of Athena where that does not include, a special love of, or at the very least, propensity for violence is an incomplete conceptualization of Athena, I'd say.
I think so. I've learned one thing from all of this. That may be one of those things, or that may be the one thing. Athena likes violence a lot. Also, I'm definitely gonna do this later, but now I just want to look up owl attack on YouTube and see what I can find, because I'm willing to bet that there are some really good videos
I'm sure.
under that search. So, like, note to self, search owl attack. And note to you all, you know, if you want to find out whether owls are violent or not, go search owl attack on YouTube.
Anything that eats is violent.
In any case, Odysseus gets this moment with Athena where she's like, I'm ready to go, let's go. And he's also, I think, equally ready to go. She un-old mans him, makes him, you know, tall, younger looking, clean, tan,
Darkens
and
his beard.
Darkens his beard, and he goes in, and his son is just like, what the fuck? You look
You must
good
be a
now.
god.
You look like a god. And he says, I am no god. Luke, I am your father. Actually, that in the Star Wars movie, that is not how that line is said either. It's just, I am your father.
True. I actually never thought about that before, because we do remember it with Luke.
Yeah, everyone says it with Luke, but it's not correct.
This is an interesting and almost I want to say odd, but more just, I think maybe Odysseus fails to read the room just a little bit, because, you know, he, like, after Telemachus is like, oh my god, like, you're different now, you look way cooler, you must be a god. Odysseus is just like, yeah, I'm your dad. It's me. And he, like, hugs him and he kisses him. And in the text says, then he kissed his son and cried, tears pouring down his cheeks. And what's interesting, especially interesting to me, is he had been holding back till then, which sort of plays into, I guess, an understanding of Odysseus's behavior since seeing his son as being a little more, like, anxious, perhaps. And this is that. But Odysseus has, I think, failed to truly conceptualize that he has to convince this guy that he's his dad before, like, hugging him and stuff like that.
It's interesting, but kind of unsurprising to me that Odysseus is just like, yeah, why wouldn't he recognize me? I mean, I'm his dad. And it's like, yeah, but you haven't been around for 20 years. Like, how the hell is he supposed to know who you are? There's some part of me that is just like, of course Odysseus would just kind of go in there and think that this would be, like, known to him.
Well, I don't suspect, this is one of those things where it's probably like, this isn't like a planned rational move. Like, I don't even know if Odysseus expected to see his son here now. Like, this isn't him being like,
it's an emotional, like, holy shit.
Yeah, but I don't think what's going through his head is like, oh, this is my son, he should know who I am. This is more like, this is my son, I want to hug him.
I'm not saying that.
Yeah.
I'm saying it in that kind of, like, automatic way that you'd go in and be like, you know, of course he knows who I am. I'm his dad. And then you're like, oh, wait. Oh. Okay. It's not like a rational, like, thought out, like, how dare he not know who I am? It's just more like going into the situation where it's like, okay, and then I reveal myself to him, and then he knows I'm his dad, and then we hug and kiss, and, like, obviously the reality of that moment is more emotional, but, like, he doesn't really think twice about the fact that his son wouldn't really know who the fuck he is, you know?
Yeah, although, then again, like, it's gotten over fairly quickly.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Telemachus expresses doubt, and then Odysseus says, no, I am your dad. It's me.
I am your father.
Exactly.
This is CNN.
and he explains, you know, how he changed his form, how Athena did it.
Right.
And then they they hug for real, and
which I think is like, this is another moment that kind of gave me the funnies a little bit, because Telemachus is like, how could you have made yourself look old and then young again? Like, was it some god? And, you know, or unless some god appeared and did it with all ease. And Odysseus is just like, it was a god. I don't know. I will say, over and over throughout this experience, things that I don't think I would have expected to make me laugh have just kind of made me laugh, because they just kind of come up in such like obvious ways that I know it's not supposed to be funny, but it's funny. Just like, I am Odysseus. I suffered terribly and I was lost, but after 20 years I have come home. As for the way I look, Athena did it. Like, yeah, you were just wondering to me aloud whether it was some god who could have done this. As it turns out, it's a god. She's done this.
I'll say that this particular encounter seems rushed. Like I'm not in the business of like criticizing the ancient poets or anything like that, but it feels like more than just that slight pushback would be necessary. Or perhaps this is an indication that Telemachus is still quite green. That he has some of his father's craftiness or cleverness. But as we'll see with, like with Penelope, she is way slower to believe that it's Odysseus than her son, which is a little.
He really does accept this quite easily, doesn't he?
Yeah, and this suggests to me that like. So when we say like Telemachus is growing up over the course of this, like this is. This feels like let's see, especially so when I'll rewind to the Iliad. When we say the Iliad is about, or one arc that we can point to is that the Iliad is about the beginning and the end of Achilles' anger, and in a way that's true, but it's so small because because Achilles, like, he does sort of give up his anger, but it's more of like a specific, like, I don't think he stops being angry. He still has that part where he says, Priam, don't test my patience or else I'll become angry again. And he also, like, he kind of does this at the command of like the gods command him to accept the ransom that Priam gives him. So it's like it was definitely helped along by just some divine power saying, hey, so like Achilles does kind of get this little arc, and like Telemachus is growing up, but it's like a little bit, like the needle's moving, but he's not like suddenly, oh, I'm super savvy and wise and stuff. Like he has the little moment with Menelaus where he's like, I should word my promises carefully, and then when the prophet shows up, he's like, oh yeah, I'm this and that. This is where I'm from, and this is what I'm doing, and even sort of here, he's very ready to believe that this is Odysseus, and perhaps the prophecies that he's been hearing up until now have helped him believe that. He has been getting this sort of direct messaging, which I guess is kind of from the gods, even though it's like from people who are like interpreting these signs. And I don't think Penelope has gotten that luxury. So that could like do some of the explanation.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, also, like, Telemachus has interacted with Athena and kind of been told this explicitly as well. So I think that might also go a long way as to kind of showing.
Has Athena told him that he'd see his dad?
I don't know if she's done it in the guise of Athena, but I'm pretty if I'm remembering correctly, I'm pretty sure that has happened.
I don't remember that happening. I feel like I remember Odysseus or someone asking Athena why Telemachus doesn't know that he's alive. And she said, 'cause.
Fair. I can maybe go back at some other time. I feel like Telemachus has been told that this will happen, and not just by the prophet.
I know
it could be someone else important. I just know that like the seed has been kind of planted there that like this will happen.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's not entirely surprising that he would believe it, especially in light of the like changing from old guy to the, younger, incredibly good looking dude in an instant. And Odysseus saying Athena did this, and Telemachus knowing that Athena is helping them would lend a lot of credence to that. So so this is the moment where they have their like big hug and cry, and then it's back to business. And God, I always look down at like the sentence that makes me crack up. Odysseus, Telemachus asks like how he got back here and who helped him to get back here. He tells him a little bit about the Phaeacians. And I wonder, does he know what happened to them? I don't think he does.
No, he has no idea. I mean, how could he, right? All he knows is that they
Right,
left
yeah,
him at
that's true.
Ithaca.
Which is kind of hilarious because now he's like, oh yeah, they helped me. They gave me awesome gifts. Like, it was great. But now let's get down to the business of like who are the suitors? How many are them? We're gonna kill them all.
Yeah, there's almost 100.
And
there's like around 100 of them, 100 men total.
this was there's a lot of guys, and this is what cracked me up as I looked down just now. I am well known for my intelligence, and I will plot to work out if we two alone can fight them or if we might need others helping us. Just telling your son who you were just like hugging and crying with, like, I am well known for my intelligence.
We can fight all of them.
We can take them all. And Telemachus is like, I'm not so sure about that because there's dozens of them. And he goes into a description of, who the suitors are, how many of them there are. They have a herald with them. They have a poet. They have slaves who are trained in carving meat. Like they aren't just here on their own, like hanging out. They've brought people with them.
Yeah, and it's weird because this is the first time we've been exposed to the sheer number of these guys. As I said, I didn't do the exact math, but like specific numbers are given, and there's around 100 men, which is a lot. And that can, I think, situate why Telemachus might be having some trouble getting them out, just because there's so many of them. Like, even if you're doing something wrong, or something that's, like, maybe not totally acceptable to everyone, it's easier to do in a group, right? And this is like a pretty
absolutely.
big group. And they're all here for the same thing. Even though it's Telemachus' house, it's their will against his, and Telemachus doesn't have the will to overpower, like, 100 other dudes who are champing at the bit for Penelope.
They brought servants to carve their meat.
Yeah.
So, and then Odysseus pulls like the ultimate trump card because like Telemachus is like, think like, do we have anyone who can help fight these guys? And Odysseus is like, oh, I don't know. Do you think Athena and her father Zeus are enough to help us? Which is hilarious.
Yeah, although, and I can't remember when this happens, they do recruit, like, I think it's 2 other people. They have Euaemus, I believe, as well as maybe one other
and Nanny.
guy.
Well, Nanny is kind of in on things behind the scenes.
I mean,
they have Euaemus.
Yeah.
For the killing,
for the fighting.
part.
Yeah.
Yes, they do recruit other people. Euaemus being one of them, and I also cannot remember who.
I can't remember exactly who the other one is.
But I know that you're right in that, like, they're not doing this alone. But I just love that, like, the card that Odysseus pulls here is like, oh, I'm sorry, is like the daddy sky god and his daughter not enough for you? And Telemachus is just like, no, those are good defenders. They're powerful.
Just in terms of so this is just kind of like a little interesting thing, and this just reinforces like Odysseus's relationship, I guess, with Athena. It says Athena and her father Zeus.
Yeah.
It's like how you'd say like, oh, Michelle Obama is the president's wife,
and her
and
husband
not the other way around, or something
right.
like that. But he's like very like, Athena first, and then he mentions her father Zeus like in terms of his relationship to her, as opposed to like the other way around. Like when you say like his daughter Zeus, like, oh, he doesn't say that. He says Athena and her father.
No, I know. I said it the right way around the first time, but like you're absolutely
I'm just
right
that
like,
I'm not saying you're wrong.
It is just, no, absolutely. It is an interesting order to throw out that name drop.
It's an expected order, I think. It's there. It's there. Is the best I can say. It's like
it's expected, but it's still interesting.
It follows from what we know about Odysseus and Athena.
Oh yeah, they are toy. They love each other. They are.
Also, I think it's worth noting that as Telemachus describes the suitors, he describes them as strong. Like 52 came from Dulichium, all top-notch fighters. These guys aren't just like soft nerds who are chilling around.
Yeah.
They are like warriors. Maybe they're not like Odysseus caliber warriors, but you know, they're not like schmucks.
Yeah, I feel like he's almost certainly doing that, at least in part, to like kind of fend off the implication from his dad that like he kind of let this happen.
Yeah. That'd be a point you would mention
like,
as well.
You know, there's, you know, like a bunch of them, they're really strong. There's a bunch more of them, they're also really strong. And then there's just me. Dad, like, please don't be mad at me. It was just me against all of these, like, strong, you know, top-notch warrior
Did you lose
guys.
that bar fight, son? He was like 300 pounds. Like, what was I supposed to do?
That's right. He KO'd me in, like, 2 seconds with a haymaker to the face. But I think Odysseus kind of gets this. And he kind of lays out the plan for him. You know, we'll go back into town. I will be old manned again. They will abuse me. You have to ignore them. And, you know, Athena is going to be with us. She will kind of nudge me and I will nod to you. We're going to hide all the weapons so that they won't have anything to fight with. And we'll put a couple of them in a really specific place so we can go ambush them. Athena will bewitch them, helped by sharp-witted Zeus. And this is where the kind of really important part comes in, that he tells him that under no circumstances whatsoever is anyone else to know that this is Odysseus. Nobody is to know that he's home, not, you know, his father, not the swineherd, not his wife, until we have determined the women's attitude, which that phrase bothers me, but I'll glance over that for now. And then, you know, the male slaves also have to be tested to see who respects him and who fears him. He's basically telling Telemachus this so he can know that what they need to do is weed out who is helping the suitors and who is not helping the suitors, so that they too can be murdered.
I'm not really sure what to make of Telemachus's response, because he's like, well, let's just test the women. Let's not test the men. Let's not bother with it. And I'm not totally sure. If I had to guess as to what's going on here, Telemachus probably knows that at least some of the slave girls are sleeping with the suitors. And for him, that is important to him. It's at the forefront of his mind because that's sort of what his mom is fending off. She's fending off this, I guess, takeover.
Barrage of advances.
Yeah, if for lack of better word, I guess, sexual takeover, if you will. You probably don't like that either.
I hate that. I hate that. But it's not untrue, though.
Well, that's how I think Telemachus is seeing it, which would explain why which would help explain why he is like fixated on the female slave, testing the female slaves and not the male slaves, because to him, I don't think that the men can lose his house ground in terms of sexual conduct in the same way the girls can. That's my guess. I don't like it any more than you do, but I think that's what's happening.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think oh god, that phrase. I was just like, yeah, I definitely hate that. But I think you're kind of meant to hate that, right?
I don't know. I don't know what is.
Okay, so let me qualify this by saying perhaps as a reader with a modern lens of viewing this.
With a modern lens,
you know, it would feel kind of be natural to really dislike that. I'm not sure. I think you're right that I'm not sure, like, that in a not modern lens, that would be taken poorly at all. Honestly, it probably wouldn't be.
I don't know. It's hard to tell if this is the product of the translation or if it's the product of, again, like our modern reading. but it does feel like there are enough parts that express not necessarily like criticism is such a strong word, but it presents it sort of in the same way that the Iliad presents like the horrors of war and the glory that you can find in war. It is conscious of this reality, and Telemachus is pointing to it in the text. And I'm not sure. Again, of course, I don't have the cultural standpoint to say whether this pointing to it is just like this is how things are and that's just the way things are, or if it's more like you should look to this to evaluate it. I'm not sure exactly how like these poems, these stories are meant to be engaged with from like a
Yeah.
but at the very least, it is being pointed to. Like this probably didn't need to happen. Like this thing that Telemachus said probably didn't need to happen, but it's there and
But
it's
it
pointing to
did.
something.
Yeah,
That's like
definitely.
my uninformed guess.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a pretty good read on it. I definitely think there's a reason that it is pointed out. And, like the reason Telemachus gives is like it would take way too long to go through each and every man testing them like that. But then, fine, do the women. Like, just,
He prioritizes that over whatever the men are doing, which
right. Which is very interesting.
yeah.
But that's kind of where that conversation ends. I mean, it literally just says, such was their conversation. And it moves on. And, we get that the
Odysseus also gives him the plan. Like he gives him the rundown, right? He's like, okay, this is what we're gonna do. Like we're gonna hide their weapons, and
yeah, we went through that.
Well, I guess we haven't been talking about any of the specifics. What I really like is that Odysseus gives him a line, right? He's like, okay, if they ask why you're moving the weapons,
That's
this is
true.
what you say, you know.
This is true.
I'll be curious if
Yeah,
he repeats it exactly, in the way that messages tend to be repeated, at least in the Iliad.
That is something we'll have to watch out for that when the time comes.
Anyway, yeah, such was their conversation.
Such was their conversation. And the guys drag Telemachus's ship up to the town.
Well, they drag it onto shore. They do not drag the ship into town.
Well, into the town. Okay, fine. Into the dock.
Onto shore.
They very well then.
Sorry, I'm being difficult. It's important to me that they drag the ship onto the shore.
Tell us about that.
I don't know. I'll talk about it with my therapist.
I wish you would.
I don't have a therapist.
I wish
Another
you would.
problem that goes unchecked.
In any case, the ship is dragged onto an undisclosed location. Now I'm just gonna fuck with you for the fun of it.
I'm fine. I'm over it now.
And a messenger is sent to the queen, who is told that Telemachus is home. She's very happy about it. The suitors are considerably less happy about it, since they had sent people out to kill him, and that has not been accomplished.
Oh, also, I actually didn't pick this out until now. The swineherd and the messenger met at the same time with the same mission, and then they both went together. And the messenger got to say, your son's come home, and then the swineherd tells her what Telemachus sent him there to say. Which was what again? What did they send him to tell him? Just that he's back, I guess?
Pretty much. As far as I actually don't remember exactly what he has been told to say to Penelope. If you want to find it, you can go for it. I will go on a little bit about the suitors moping, because mope they do. Specifically, Eurymachus and Antinous are both very, very upset that Telemachus is not dead, and that they now must make new plans to murder him. Since he will be the ruin of them if he is not in fact dead. And also I think they've kind of wisened up to the fact that he is now aware of their plan to murder him.
Uh-huh.
And that if he indeed does come back and blabs to everyone about how they plan to kill him, everyone will rightfully be really pissed off at them. Because as it turns out, killing someone in their own house, or like usurping someone's house from them and killing them, is kind of a party foul.
I said poor form. Poor form.
Poor form indeed. Did you find it?
I did not.
Okay.
It appears to be buried in a fair bit of text, and unfortunately I didn't note it down. I assume that it amounts to generally, I'm Telemachus, I'm back. Although maybe...
I think we should probably just move on.
Yeah, I guess
Because we have some exciting things to talk about before before this is all over. And we hear from a suitor that we haven't heard from before, who stands in kind of as the contrast to the rest of the suitors and gives us a little preview of what will kind of happen when Odysseus starts the slaughter. So, and Amphinomus, the famous son of Nisus, spoke. You know, it is pointed out that he is intelligent and that Penelope in general has preferred his speeches over the other men's. I would imagine that she probably doesn't like many of their speeches at all, considering that she doesn't want them around and is constantly fending off their sexual advances towards her.
So a couple things here. So for one thing, one of the reasons why I was even expressing hesitance about what Euamus's what Euamus's message might be is that I feel like he was told to tell Penelope about this murder plot, and that's why she's come down. Like, that's why she knows now. I couldn't find the part for the life of me. And for the life of me, I mean, I spent like around 60 seconds trying to look for it, but as you said, we have to move on. But also, Penelope's intentions and attitudes are, as I've mentioned before, like generally shrouded to us. And it's interesting that when we hear about Amphinomus, this well-spoken suitor, that we are given an evaluation of him through Penelope's perspective. We're not told he was intelligent, his speeches were better than other men's. We're told he was intelligent, Penelope preferred his speeches over other men's, which is, you know, like very specifically like situated in Penelope's from Penelope's point of view. One thing that will happen is that Penelope will put to the suitors like the famous axe test, where it's like, okay, I'll marry whoever does this, whoever can like shoot this arrow through this axe head. And we don't know. We'll talk about this obviously more when we get there, but like we don't know if she knows that Odysseus is actually back, if she like actually recognizes him, and she set up this test to give him opportunity to show himself. We don't know if she's made this test to actually see if there's someone that she will marry after all this time. We don't know if she's even like considered any of these suitors. Perhaps she has. And I don't know, this, like, the fact that we're given like a preference of Penelope in this like particular instance in relation to like evaluating one of these suitors, and I guess by extension the other suitors as well, like, is this something that we can take as this is what's going on with her in the meantime?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like an offhand comment that's made, but it actually shows a lot more than is really there at first glance. And then what he says, you know, might go some way to kind of pointing out why she is more partial to his speeches over the other guys, because he basically says, I don't want to kill Telemachus. You know, it's bad to kill a royal someone of royal blood. But if the gods say so, then I'll kill him. If God tells me to kill him, then I'll kill him. But I don't really have any desire to kill him otherwise. Mm-hmm. And they're all like, yeah, okay. You know, rabble. Everyone agrees with that. And they go back to Odysseus's house, and this is when Penelope gets pissed off and finally decides to like show her face. Comes downstairs. She's found out about the plot to kill her son. So I'm thinking that what you were saying about you, Amos, possibly
Actually,
bringing
it
the
says
message from Telemachus.
Medon, who's a male slave, I believe, had heard their plans and he told her. So that's what's happening here.
Gotcha.
My suspicions were not brought to fruition.
She has found out, though, and she is not happy about these men wanting to kill her baby boy, which she goes off on them and, like, verbally rips them a new one. Hones in on Antinous especially, saying, everyone says you're really smart, but really you're just pathologically insane. Yeah, no, you don't have any respect for the gods, for Xenia. You have no respect for your benefactor. You're trying to court his wife and kill his son. Like, stop it.
Well, keep in mind, I think it's important for us to remember this isn't like Xenia related necessarily, because Xenia is specifically dealing with like strangers. This is more just, I'm not sure what the Greek word for it would be.
She does say, "Do you have no respect for ties created by supplication?"
Yeah, yeah, Odysseus like helped his father out. I'm not sure if that was in like.
I'm not sure. Is Xenia specifically? I thought Xenia was just the overall like guest right.
Well, so it's tied to I guess the only real modern word like xenophobia, a fear of the other. Or fear of strangers,
Gotcha.
of the foreigners,
that makes sense.
Stuff like that. So this is the same. That's what I understand anyway. It's possible I'm wrong, but Xenia specifically has to do with, which is not to say that there aren't other such guest rights and stuff like that. Like we saw with the exchange in the Iliad between Glaucus and, was it Diomedes? I think it was Diomedes. Yeah, Diomedes. And they're like, oh yeah, my dad. How's your dad? And that means that we're brothers by guest rights or whatever. And then they exchange gifts. And this is like, Penelope is kind of bringing up the same sort of thing with Antinous, right? Like Odysseus housed your father or helped you out when the Ithacans were eager to kill him and take his wealth, and like you have no respect for that. So this is that, but here, I think.
Okay. But yeah, she pissed. She big mad.
Yeah, she drops this like big history on him and tells him to stop and has her and says, tell the others to stop as well. And this is where Eurymachus comes in.
Yeah. He basically says all of this stuff that like is supposed to endear himself to her and pacify her, and at the same time he's thinking about killing her kid. Wouldn't you know? Rude. Very, very rude.
Yeah, and in contrast with a lot of, I've mentioned like, the black boxness of a lot of characters, this is the opposite of that, where it says that he, Eurymachus, spoke to mollify her, all the while he was devising plans to kill her son. Like, this much is not left in doubt.
Yeah, you were given a direct portal into his brain and exactly what he is thinking.
Yes, which is unusual for the Odyssey, I think, especially for something like this. Although it stands out to me because this is the sort of information I want all the time, but I'm only getting it here with Eurymachus.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then Penelope goes upstairs and falls asleep.
She goes upstairs and falls asleep. She's had such a tough run of things.
Yeah.
And as evening falls, Eumaeus, who has wandered over to the palace to give this news to Penelope, has wandered back to his home, where Odysseus is, and Athena taps her wand, old man's Odysseus once again, so that Eumaeus will not recognize him. And Telemachus also makes it back. And wait, No, Telemachus is there.
Yeah.
Telemachus has been there with his dad.
He's hanging out.
So Eumaeus comes back and he's like, how's it going? Are the suitors still there? As if they would not still be there. Or, well, he's asking if the group of suitors that has been lurking, waiting for him to kill him, have come back, really is what he's asking. And Eumaeus wisely says, like, I didn't want to trek through town asking that question, which is hilarious.
Is the ambush party back? The one that planned to kill Telemachus.
Does anyone know if those guys who were planning to kill Telemachus are back? But he has seen, as he passed the Hill of Hermes, a bunch of guys with shields and spears who could be, probably are, but he is not certain are those very men, And with this, Telemachus, cracks a little smile and looks at his dad, meets his eyes. Eumaeus not being able to really see this kind of visual exchange between the two of them. And they all cook some dinner, go to bed.
Yeah, and I think the point of this last little scene with Eumaeus, Telemachus, and Odysseus is just to, like, firmly establish that Odysseus is back in disguise, right? It's even mentioned, Athena came beside Odysseus and touched him with her wand again to make him ragged and old, just to make sure when the swineherd came in, he would not recognize his master in case he told Penelope the secret. So we're given a reason, and we're sort of demonstrated it right here, where, Telemachus is in the know, and Odysseus obviously is in the know because he's in disguise, And I wonder if Telemachus's question is sort of like, when there's a subject you want to avoid and you're like in a room with someone and you want to talk about anything else and you'll bring up just like the dumbest thing or like the most out of left field subject or just something to talk about. I feel like that's what he's doing here because this is kind of a dumb question. Like,
I'm not sure about that. So I actually think that there is a point to this question. Which, I mean, I think it could be partly what you're saying, but I also think it's partly, like, kind of Telemachus giving his dad the, like, wink, wink, nudge, nudge that, like, okay, this is when we start the plan. Like, we've made this plan, we've talked about it, the news has been delivered, to Penelope that I'm alive. Now I'm going to, like, pointedly ask about, like, are these guys who are coming to kill me back? And now we know that all of the suitors are back. Everyone gets to eat up, get some Z's, and then the murder begins. Although it's not going to begin immediately. There is a little bit more of a build-up before we quite get there, but still, the parts are being set into motion. And that is where book 16 leaves us off. On that note, unless you have any other final thoughts, Wriste?
Nope, I don't think so.
Then I will lead us into the lovely Dr. Daniel, who I'm sure has some really interesting insights to give us. So please, as we have told you over and over, listen to Dr. Dan. He's cool, we love him, and we thank him immensely for doing these tags for us, which have been nothing short of completely awesome. So yeah, listen to Dr. Dan, and we'll be back with you all soon.
Hello everybody, my name is Daniel, otherwise known as Dr. Daniel, Dr. Dan, or the Dancing Grad, and I'm here to offer some thoughts on Wriste and Llama's conversation about the Odyssey, books 15 and 16. My notes for this episode mostly center around the original Greek and how the terms do or don't show up in Emily Wilson's translation, along with one sort of larger cultural topic that I'll address towards the end. First, towards the beginning of Book 15, Pisistratus pushes back against Telemachus' order that they leave in the middle of the night. After he speaks at around line 57 or so, the narrator goes, "Then all at once, dawn on her golden throne lit up the sky." There was a little bit of confusion about the exact timeline here, about how much time elapses between the end of Pisistratus' speech and the arrival of dawn. However, Dr. Wilson actually left out something that's there in the ancient Greek that Fagles actually includes that could have helped clarify the timeline somewhat. The ancient Greek at line 56 reads, Hos ephatautika de cruso thronos eluthen eos. Thus he spoke, and immediately golden-throned dawn came. The first half of that line is hos ephato, quite literally, thus he spoke, or he spoke in this way. Then in the second half of the line, we have the adverb autika, which basically means immediately, or following immediately upon the event that we just talked about. Fagles renders hos ephato with the translation at his words, but Dr. Wilson leaves this out entirely. Her translation, then all at once, renders the adverb autika pretty faithfully, but the context of having hos ephato, thus he spoke right before it, might have helped clarify the timeline somewhat. Next, Llama found Helen's injunction that Telemachus should remember her on his wedding day very interesting. At around line 123 or 4 or so, she says to him, Sweet boy, I also have a gift, crafted by my own hands. Remember Helen when your own wedding day at last arrives, and let your bride wear this. The Greek for this section at lines 125 through 127 read as follows. Doron toi kai ego teknon phile tuto didomi, mne melanes keiron. Polu eiratu eskamu orein, se aloko forein. Dear child, I give this gift to you, a remembrance of the Keiron Helenes, a remembrance of the hands of Helen, for your wife to wear at the time of your own really lovely wedding. The Greek in question here is mnema Helenes Keiron. Mnema is a noun that basically means a remembrance or recollection, some sort of artifact of something. And then the two terms after that, Helenes and Cheiron, are the name of Helen and the word hands. Both are in what's termed the genitive case. That indicates some sort of connection to another noun. And the genitive case is often translated with the use of the preposition of. So it makes sense for a robe to be a quote-unquote remembrance of the hands of the person who made it. So a remembrance of the hands of Helen. However, because of the way that Greek word order works, or doesn't necessarily, meaning that word order doesn't always matter in ancient Greek, the way that the poet has it framed can make it very much seem like we're talking about a mnema Helenes, a remembrance of Helen. They postponed the word keiron, hands, until after the name Helen. So Dr. Wilson's translation takes advantage of the fact that mnema and Helenes are placed next to one another, even though quite literally in the Greek what it says is a remembrance of the hands of Helen, rather than a remembrance of Helen herself. Next, when Odysseus is talking to Eumaeus in disguise, he says, starting at around line 340 or so, Odysseus, experienced in pain, answered, quote, I hope Zeus loves you, Eumaeus, as I do, since you have saved me from the agonies of wandering. The worst thing humans suffer is homelessness, end quote. The Greek for that last line, quote, the worst thing humans suffer is homelessness, is at line 343 of the Greek. Planktosunes du gesti kakoteron allobrotoisin. There is no other thing worse for mortals than planktosune. The term that Dr. Wilson translates as homelessness is etymologically related to the verb plasdomai, which quite literally means to wander or to roam about. So homelessness in this regard is being cast as a wandering about or roaming for lack of a physical place to go back to as your home base. I've said in a previous tag that the entire driving force of the Odyssey is the concept of nostos, or homecoming. This use of the word planktosune, or wandering or roaming about, throws that idea into relief. The use of this term also very cheekily references the proem of the entire poem back at the beginning of Book 1. The Greek of the first two lines reads Andramoienepe musa polutropon hos malapola planthe epe troies hieron toliathron epersen. Sing to me of a man, the man of many ways, Andrapolutropon, muse, the man who wandered a whole lot, hos malapola planthe, when he had sacked the holy citadel of Troy. The verb in that relative clause there, hos malapola planthe, is the verb planthe, which derives from the verb plasdomai, to wander or to roam. So the implication is that once you have a home, or once you've regained your home, then there's no more need for wandering after that. In Book 16, when Telemachus returns to Ithaca, he addresses Eumaeus the swineherd as grandpa, according to Dr. Wilson's translation. The Greek term for this is ata, which is actually kind of an exceedingly rare term in the Iliad and the Odyssey. It's used twice in the Iliad, and it's used 6 times in the Odyssey, and within each epic, it's only used to refer to the same person. In the Iliad, it's used in Iliad 9 and 17 to refer to Phoenix, and in the Odyssey, it's used 3 times in Book 16, twice in Book 17, and once in Book 21 to refer to Eumaeus. The term Atta is defined in A Lexicon of the Homeric Dialect by Richard John Cunliffe as follows, quote, Atta is a widely spread word for father, doubtless derived from childish speech. It is used in addressing an elder. So the use of the term to address both Phoenix in the Iliad and Eumaeus in the Odyssey indicate both age and respect afforded to those characters. Later on in Book 16, the name of the one suitor whose speeches Penelope tends to like is Amphinomus. The name derives from two halves. The amphi part is a preposition that means both or both sides, and the nomos part derives from the word for law or custom. So I think there are two ways to read this name. Either Amphinomus operates according to two different sets of laws or customs, the laws or customs of the suitors versus the laws or customs of Odysseus' house, or he operates on both sides of the law or the custom. So he ingratiates himself to Penelope by saying good things, but he's also one of the suitors that's trying to disrupt the harmony of Odysseus' household. Finally, there was a great discussion about the gender politics of the plan to test the female slaves and leave the male slaves alone. By this point, it's probably become clear that patriarchy reigns supreme in the Homeric epics. So this misogynistic casting of the female slaves as sort of the stress points of Odysseus' household is perhaps not surprising. I think that this plan operates in two different registers. First, the focus on women's fidelity, especially perhaps in the sexual sense, throws into relief Penelope's steadfastness and Penelope's resolution against the suitors. Second, this reference to the slave women in particular presages a really chilling moment that's going to occur in Book 22, after the suitors have been slaughtered themselves. We'll discuss this much more in the episode with Book 22, but in short, Odysseus orders the slave women who have been unfaithful to his household by sleeping with the suitors to be killed. This misogyny and scapegoating of women is a current that runs throughout a lot of stories in Greek culture, whether latent or overt, as here in the Odyssey. Alright, that's about all I have, so with that, I'm going to toss it back to Llama and Wriste.
Thank you so much, Dr. Daniel, and thank you once again, dear listener, for tuning in. We hope you've enjoyed our discussion as well as Dr. Daniel's wonderfully informative expert opinions. We also hope you'll take the opportunity to continue reading along with us, since there is still plenty to love about these stories. Keep an eye out for future episodes by following us on Twitter at Homer_bound, or wherever you happen to be listening to us right now. We're looking forward to seeing you for the next episode, but until next time, take care and thank you for joining us for this episode of Homer Bound.